Hello, everybody, and welcome into Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day, and on this episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Ed Steer to the program, a precious metals expert who has been analyzing the space for over 20 years. He is a former contributor to Casey Research and the founder of Ed Steer's Gold and Silver Digest. We're going to discuss what it will take for silver to get above and stay above $35 an ounce. His current views on manipulation of both the silver and gold markets. Is that game nearing its end? How exploding debt and deficits in the US are driving both metals, the increased geopolitical risk now in play due to escalations in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, how could that affect precious metals markets, and so much more. Strap yourselves in for my conversation with Ed Steer. Ed Steer, great to have you back on Commodity Culture. I want to talk about the silver market first because we've seen silver pick up steam recently, but as always, failing to breach and remain above $35. This has, of course, led to comments that once again, the banking cartel has tamped down the price through mass selling of paper contracts in the futures market. It's also notable to mention that silver looked like it was on its way to $35 before the Liberation Day announcements, when it fell dramatically below $30. So has been staging a recovery since then. What are your current thoughts on the price action in the silver market?
Well, that Monday, that big rally on Monday was all paper trading on the COMEX, as you know, and as the buyers came into the market, so the managed money traders and the others that were buying long contracts in the COMEX futures market, which is what the act of them doing it is what caused the price to rise. But while they're buying long contracts, somebody has to be prepared to go short against them, because you can't buy a long without a short, and you can't go short without somebody buying the long side. And that's what was happening. As always, it was the collusive commercial banks and some commodity trading houses that were willingly taking the short side of the trades, all the way up in price, and then they ended up, capping it out at up 5.3% or whatever. But there was a short for every long. In this case, on Monday and Tuesday combined, the short position increased in silver by 16,000 COMEX contracts, which is 80 million ounces of the stuff. And Friday's commitment traders report, I suspect, will show a record commercial net short position in silver, the likes that we've never seen before. And this was just another instance of massive shorting to prevent silver and gold as well from blowing sky high on that particular day. So it's the same old at the moment. And, I'll be able to talk more intelligently about it on Friday once I see that report. But they're still there, keeping the lid on the price. But you've been looking at the price action for the last month or so, and it's just a matter of how long can they keep this thing contained before it finally does blow, because they can't keep it up forever.
Yeah, very interesting. I had Bob Moriarty on the show recently. He takes a bit of a contrary stance to the allegations of silver manipulation. He said all markets are manipulated. Tell me which markets are not. And he even went as far to say, if people talk about manipulation, it means it's a clear sign they don't know what they're talking about. Now, I'm not trying to create a conflict between yourself and Mr. Moriarty. I greatly enjoy speaking to both of you, but I wonder what your response to that is.
When you sent me the question, I had to laugh out loud, because GATA was formed. The Gold Antitrust Action Committee was formed in around 1999 by Bill Murphy and Chris Powell, and I became actively involved with them several years later. Right from the start, Moriarty dumped on us for years, saying that nobody cared what the price of gold was, certainly not the Federal Reserve, and it wasn't being managed. This went on for, I don't know, at least a decade or more. But finally, as it has dawned on the gold community, is that GATA was right. Rather than admit he was wrong, he just changed his tune to saying that all markets are being managed. And we haven't heard a peep out of him about it in the last 15 years or so. But this is typical of the attitude back then. And there are still some of these so-called precious metal experts, and I'm not going to name names, that deny it vociferously in public, but they know better, and they'll admit to it in private, but they never say it because they have a certain peer group they hang around with, and to admit that they've been wrong for the last quarter of a century is not something they're prepared to do. But nowadays, and there are very few people in the precious metals world, whether it be commentators such as yourself and myself and everybody else, that aren't aware that the prices are being actively managed almost 24/7.
And now a quick break to hear from our sponsor, ARC Silver Gold Osmium owner Ian Everard is considered one of the most honest and level-headed gold and silver dealers in the United States, praised even by his competitors. So give him a call today to take advantage of the specials right now. Silver Kangaroos 2023 1-ounce coins, mint fresh, only $2.47 over spot. Mint fresh silver maple leafs 2025 coins, 1 ounce, $2.87 over spot. While supplies last. Reach out today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And now, back to the interview. I want to talk about gold for a moment here as well, because it's been performing extremely well, obviously, started to garner some mainstream attention even, although a lot of that mainstream attention is negative. There's been some articles released by a variety of larger mainstream publications saying that, is gold really worth it? More kind of casting doubt on the benefits of owning physical gold, which I find quite interesting. But before we do get to diving deeper into gold, I would like to bring up the fact that silver, if gold is woefully underowned by the majority of retail investors in the West, silver is even more so. It's not even on most people's radar screens. What do you think it's going to take for that to shift and for silver to start getting some attention here from your man in the street?
Well, let's start off with the gold question first.
Yeah.
As you know, gold has been rising, strongly for the last 6-8 months. It's really been screaming so far this year, and the sole reason for that. And we've seen lots of gold shipped from London and Switzerland into New York. Everybody's talking about the huge deliveries in the COMEX and all this, all the frequent flyer points the gold is picking up between London and New York and Switzerland and New York. But the real reason, and it's fine. Hey, it's great. We all love it. But the thing is, here is why the gold price rose. And it's for a simple reason. Since the beginning of the year, the commercial traders, the guys that are short the market, and short silver, they have bought back 147,000 gold contracts that they were short, either through delivery or buying back a long contract to cover the short position. Now, 147,000 gold contracts is 14.7 million ounces of the stuff. And when you go into the market and you buy it, whether it be paper or physical, that's going to drive the price higher. And that's called a short covering rally. And that's exactly what we've been having. So that's why the price has gone up. And of course, the result of that is, it's increased demand in the retail market to a certain extent. And now the big hedge funds are starting to get involved. So, it's been a self-fulfilling and, been feeding on, it's a feedback loop that's, really gained momentum. And with the US dollar and everything in the toilet, and the talk of war here and the talk of war there, and, things going on in the United States government along with Donald Trump and all his big, beautiful bill. This is all just, throwing gasoline on a fire. So, along with the short covering, the gold's really been on a tear. But as for, and even then, silver is, the amount of gold going into all the world's ETFs and mutual funds is we're at record high price, what, $3,500 in gold right now, and there is less gold in all the world's ETFs and mutual funds and depositories now than there was when gold broke above 2,000 several years ago. So, even in gold, the institutional buying is not there. It has picked up a lot, and I'm sure that'll change over time. But right now, it's not what it was back when gold was 2,000. And why that's the case, I don't know. You don't know, and nobody else knows. It's been amazing to watch, and everybody's commenting on it, and rightly so. Now, as for silver, that's really different. to get people involved in silver, they're going to have to get involved in gold first. But the thing I've noticed, and I subscribe to Nick Laird's Charter Us website, and I get all my statistics from him. I just commented on the fact that even though gold has not, the amount of gold in all the all the ETFs in the world has not got back to where it was when gold was at $2,000. In silver, it's the opposite. Even though we haven't even got back to 35, let alone 50, the amount of silver that's being deposited in all the world's ETFs and mutual funds and depositories is now back to where it was at its high of about 5 or 6 years ago. So even though gold hasn't reached that mark yet, silver is already there. So there's been stealth buying in the in silver, as we've seen in the deliveries in New York and amounts of silver that's been flown in from London as well. And we've also had stealth buy. I've been commenting on this in my column for the last couple of weeks now. We have had stealth buying in the silver equities now for the last couple of weeks, and I just noticed on my chart last night that the silver equities are now higher than they've been since back in, I think it was July of 2021. So we have had a huge but quiet move in the silver stocks and in the silver and in the physical silver market that has been, that you wouldn't notice unless you knew, you could see the charts and see the numbers for yourself, which is what I show in my column. So even though John Q. Public is not involved in the precious metals, this is a big boys game right now. Bullion banks, hedge funds, they are, they've had their come to Jesus moment, and they're just trying to get out of their short positions as much as they can, mostly through taking delivery on the COMEX, which we've seen, and short covering in the COMEX futures market and paper. And as I've been saying for several months now, this looks like a giant book squaring operation as they get prepared for even far higher prices in gold and silver than we're looking at right now. It's one of these days, $35 will look like a bargain basement price for silver. And once it breaks through 50, even before it gets through 40, I'm sure the public will be involved and we'll be off to the races. But right now we're in the slowly at first. The suddenly part is yet to come.
Wow, a lot to unpack there. I want to pull on the thread of short covering when it comes to gold's price appreciation. You're saying a lot of that is due to short covering. And you also mentioned that they're these bullion banks and bigger players are trying to get out of their short positions. Do you think that reckoning has come when it comes to the gold market, at least? Do you think that those who have been shorting gold in a big way have woken up? You said there's a come to Jesus moment. Have they now looked at gold's price appreciation basically going straight up? I mean, at least since around September of 2023, have they been looking at this and telling themselves, hey, I don't think this is a game we want to play anymore? What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, they've been heading for the exits quietly for a long time, but now it's really picked up a lot of steam. And like I said, this has been a big short covering rally since the beginning of the year. They've either been covering their paper shorts by going long, by buying long contracts, or those that are short, or I'm sorry, those that are long, so, and they've got the money. Says they look at around the world and they say, man, the U.S. dollar's heading down the drain. Everything's heading down the drain. We're not interested in holding paper gold anymore. We want the real stuff. So those that are long, and they're taking delivery of tens of thousands of contracts worth. Those that are long are ponying up the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that they're long, and saying, look, and telling the shorts, okay, we want delivery. Give us the gold. Okay, that's exactly what's happening. They're out there squaring their books, and they said, we don't want to hold paper longs anymore. We want the physical in hand, which is what the retail guys are doing too. I mean, we've been doing this. Your listeners, you, me, and everybody else has been stacking this stuff for what, years? I've been doing it since 1999. So, I've been around this business for a while. So now the big boys are starting to stack the stuff. China, Russia, Iran, Poland, whatever. You pick a country. They've been stacking this stuff, and hey, they're people just like you and I, and they can see the writing on the wall. So, this is the start. The guys in gold, the big boys, know this is going to come to an end. So they're just taking the same precautions that just you and I are doing, except they're doing it on massive scales and massive amounts of money.
Yeah, some great thoughts. I would like to dive a little bit deeper into gold because you brought up a lot of very interesting points. Obviously, the debasement of the US dollar, the geopolitical risk that's been escalating, the debt and deficits, I mean, are completely out of control. We had, the Doge committee was supposedly going to clean everything up, and I think much like what was it, the Grace Commission under Reagan, they weren't actually able to make any meaningful impact whatsoever. All of these tailwinds working in gold's favor makes it feel like even though we've gone so high, I think a lot more quickly than many people expected, that the best is yet to come for the gold price. It just feels like there's a not much of a ceiling up ahead. What are your thoughts? How high do you think gold could go here, and how fast?
Huh. Okay, it will go as high as the world's bullion banks will allow it. Okay, as they're running the price show in the COMEX futures market. They still, as I've stated, and everybody knows, they're managing. I mean, just look at the price today or the price yesterday. If it gets too high, you can see it get tapped down a bit. It will go as high as they allow it. And that same as it can be said of the other three precious metals, silver, platinum, and palladium, plus copper as well. That's another commodity that the powers that be are keeping on a short leash. But a runaway panic short covering rally to the upside could see gold and silver prices that we frankly couldn't imagine. In the case of silver, it would be hundreds of dollars an ounce, which is where it should be priced anyway, right now because of the supply-demand deficit. But how high can they go? It will be the moment that the bullion banks, the big shorts, decide to cover for themselves. And like I said, it could be anything, and it can go as high as you can possibly imagine. We just don't know. But as Ted Butler, rest in peace, said, he said the short position held by the 4 and 8 largest traders in the COMEX futures market, what they decide to do, will determine the prices of gold going forward, and a lot of other commodities as well.
I want to get your thoughts on the events that have been unfolding regarding the Russia-Ukraine conflict, because, as we've mentioned, the geopolitical risk is getting heightened here. We've seen Ukraine destroy a number of nuclear-capable aircraft in Russia, actually aircraft that were left uncovered as part of a treaty with the United States to allow these nuclear aircraft to be in full view of satellites. Ukraine taking advantage of that. And then we've also seen an attack on the bridge to Crimea using underwater explosives. There was peace talks in Istanbul, but they weren't talks. They were just both sides handing over memorandums of here's what we want. And both of them are completely unacceptable to both sides. So there's absolutely no way that either side is going to accept here. How do you see all of this playing out?
Huh, well, boy, now there's a real can of worms, Jesse. That's for sure. Thanks for the hardball question. Okay. Look, in the world today, since last 100 and some years since the start of the Federal Reserve, there's the Western globalist power elite. Okay, that's of the United States, Europe, Britain, Israel, Japan, whatever you want to call the Western globalist power elite. They've got us into World War I, World War II, the whole 9 yards. And, with the fiat currencies heading to zero, the economy's in bad shape. The world's economies are imploding, and they need war in the worst possible way. That's what they're, whether it be with Russia or Iran or China or all three, it doesn't matter to them. And they're doing everything in their power to see that it happens. I mean, their chances, they could have had peace settlements in Ukraine with an Iran. I mean, it was very simple. Anybody could see that if they decided on this, it would all be over, okay? None of this ever had to happen, especially in Ukraine, where, it was all started by the United States, and we've seen it snowball to what it is today. And, Russia has got no choice. They're just going to have to, roll over Ukraine to a certain extent until they've reached their objectives. But this war is, as American writer and intellectual Randolph Bourne stated way back when, war is the health of the state. He argued that the state becomes more powerful and sacred during war, and that distinction between state, nation, and government is blurred. Those in the deep state have all the money and power. They'll have all the money they ever need. Now they want absolute power over citizens of their nation states. War allows them to get away with a great many things, with 9/11 and the Patriot Act being one of the most recent iterations of that. Okay? I think everybody can agree on that one. And it gets extended, what, every year? I think every year they extend it another year, every 2 years or whatever it is, And, Ernest Hemingway said it even better. He said the first panacea for a mismanaged nation is inflation of the currency. The second is war. Both bring a temporary prosperity and both bring a permanent ruin. And both are the refuge of political and economic opportunists. And that's what we have today. He said war is a tool used by ineffective governments to distract from their failings and not a notable or patriotic endeavor. And with the West loaded to the eyeballs with unpayable debt and totally debased currencies, wars are a good time for a great reset of some type. We are long overdue for one, and is why I'm keeping an eye on David Rogers' Webb, The Great Taking. That's something else that, is going to be in play here. But, as far as the wars are concerned, they want one. They can do a lot of things when there's wars going on. And so no matter, we're going to get one because they're going to make sure it happens. As simple as that, whether it be a false flag or what it is.
Yeah, I'm gonna go off script for a moment here because there's something I've been grappling with. It's maybe more of a philosophical question, and dear viewers, don't worry, we're getting back to gold and silver in a second here. But do you think there's a possibility that those who pull the levers of power are clinical psychopaths in the sense that they revel in death and destruction? It's not just that there's an economic benefit. It's not just that they're more able to consolidate their power, but it is a genuine joy of killing for the sake of it. I know this is totally out of left field, but it's something I've been grappling with. I wonder what your thoughts are.
Oh, I'm 100% in agreement. You have to understand that people like this, okay, the people that congregate all the power and all the negative power in the world, these people have a tendency to find each other and make these plans. I mean, they're all psychopaths or sociopaths on a scale of God knows what. But you find any one of these guys, okay, just pick one, and they're all sociopaths or psychopaths. So that's the only way that we as normal citizens, brought up normally, would never think like this.
Yeah.
But a certain percentage of the population are psychopathic. And they're going to, if they're determined and have enough of, power hungry attitude about them, they're going to find each other and they're going to recruit each other, and they all end up doing what they're doing today. And you can see it, on full display in the deep state of the U.S. and in Britain and in Europe right now. It's no, they're in full cry right now and almost totally visible to the public if the public knows what they're looking for.
Yeah, I don't even think you have to look behind the scenes. I think you can look at Ursula von der Leyen. I think you can look at Starmer, Macron, Merz. I think you can look at all these people as being actually evil human beings inherently. But let's not go too far down that rabbit hole. What I do want to ask is how escalation of conflicts, whether we're talking Russia, Ukraine, whether we're talking something potentially occurring with Iran, obviously Israel, Palestine is in play. How could a continued escalation of conflicts potentially affect silver and gold markets in your view?
We're just talking about psychopaths and sociopaths. And as I've been saying for the last 15 or so years in my column, when this 50-plus year price management scheme in the precious metals and other commodities comes to an end, it won't happen in a news vacuum. As I said, these various and sundry psychopaths in the West will get their way eventually, most likely through some sort of false flag events, although something they can point a finger at to say it was this event, it was over here, look over here, that was this that happened that causes silver to blast through 5,000 on its way to 10,000 and silver to blow through $300 an ounce, but not the men behind the curtain. And as you rightly pointed out, they're no longer hiding. All the people you mentioned fit that bill very, very nicely. So they're going to use whatever happens. This price management scheme has been going on for 50 plus years. When Nixon took us off the gold exchange standard in 1971, so they had a grand plan to suppress, gold and silver plus which means they've suppressed all commodity prices. Everything is stressed. Nobody knows what the true price of silver, gold, wheat, corn, oats, sugar, rubber, oil. We don't know what the real price of that is because gold and silver have been not allowed to trade freely. And they had a grand plan back 50 years ago to suppress prices, but now that this whole thing is coming to an end, they have no exit strategy. Okay, none whatsoever. So they have to create an event, some sort of news item that they can point to and say, this is what caused this to happen and not them. So one of these days, when these political risks finally do manifest themselves, in a major way, then we're going to see the repricing of a lot of commodities, including gold and silver. And as I've said before and said in the past, they're going to be shockingly high.
And speaking of geopolitics, how do you think China fits into the gold and silver story? Many believe they have severely underreported their stated gold reserves. Are you in that camp? And how do you expect China to impact precious metals markets moving forward?
Yes, I'm totally in that camp, like Alistair McLeod. I firmly believe that China has north of 20,000 tons of gold squirreled away that they have not made public. Several years ago, over the last 10 or 15 years, they've come out and they've readjusted their gold reserves, saying we got this much, but they haven't done that for a long time. But there's no question about it in my mind. They've got far more gold stashed away than they're talking about. And at some point, when the LBMA and the London Metal Exchange and the COMEX paper markets blow up or melt down, the Shanghai Gold Exchange, which only deals in physical metals, will be the only exchange still standing. They will set the price of silver and gold and other commodities going forward. And one can only hope that they'll allow them to trade freely because, they've been controlled in the paper markets for the last half century in the West. And hopefully that the exchange in Shanghai will allow them to trade at whatever their true prices are going to be. But I have no idea when that's going to be, but sooner or later it's inevitable as the fiat currency system of the West comes totally unglued.
Yeah, the US dollar falling fairly dramatically since the start of the year. What are the drivers behind that in your view? Obviously, debt and deficits play a big role. And is the US dollar still the prettiest mayor at the glue factory of fiat currencies worldwide?
Yeah, well, it's the reserves currency, and it's going to remain that way for a while. But its use in the world has really shrunk a lot. In my lifetime, I remember it was like 75 or 80%. Now it's down to what, under 60 or 59? I can't remember. So, there's no question about it. I mean, everybody's looking at the U.S. and said, you've been printing this stuff. The U.S.'s greatest export is not any material; it's U.S. dollars. That's what they're good at exporting. And people, countries are looking at each other, for the last 5, 10 years and, getting down to 2 years and 1 year, it's becoming even more pronounced. They say they never ring a bell at the top of a market or the moment when a reserve currency begins an irreversible decline. But the moment that the World Bank, the IMF, and the European Central Bank sees Russia's 300 billion in foreign reserves was what I consider a crossing the Rubicon moment for the dollar. Okay, it will never recover from that. But in the end, all fiat currencies are doomed, whether they have reserve status or not. And only gold and silver assets that are not simultaneously someone else's liability will survive. Gold at the moment is in the process of remonetizing itself. Okay, I mean, watch the price go up. I mean, nobody has to say is it money or not. I mean, look at it, there it is. Okay. And silver will follow the moment it is allowed. And, that we want everything to happen tomorrow. But, these world events, whether they be currencies or wars or whatever, take a long time or a fair amount of time to evolve. And, we're just passing through history, and this is all part of history. And sooner or later, it will all come crashing down. And but the U.S. dollar's days as a reserve currency are, they're still going to be there, but because there's nothing to replace it, really. But the number one currency in the world going forward is already gold, and silver will follow.
What are your thoughts on Trump's tariff strategy overall? The latest between US and China has been that Trump has apparently said President Xi is very hard to deal with. Very interesting after tariffing China. At one point, the tariffs were above, 150%, and then they were brought down to 30%. Trump is the one calling Xi the one that's hard to deal with. Very interesting there. Do you think his heart is in the right place in terms of the desire to bring manufacturing back to the United States? Do you think this is a matter of economic incompetence? Do you think he actually does know what he's doing and people need to wait until the dust settles? Is it somewhere in between? What are your overall thoughts on his strategy?
You know, we're in the middle of this thing, and it's hard to make a diagnosis. But I can tell you right now, if you look around at the world, the countries of the world leaders in the Southeast Asia and Europe, and mostly in Southeast Asia, where most of the exporting manufacturing is in the world is concentrated now. They're and Russia, and you pick a country. I mean, they've looked at the U.S. and it's basically gone rogue. You know, you're looking at what Trump is doing. He's all over the map.
Yeah.
And they're just saying, like, what can we do to save ourselves from this country that has gone totally rogue? Okay, and so they're just trying to protect themselves as best they can. But for me to say how this is all going to turn out, I don't know. But all you have to do is look at the dollar, look at the price of gold. Okay, they know what they're doing, and it's become a trickle, and the stream has become a river. In the last 6 months, and the year's not over, and we're going to see far higher prices. But there's just no way that the United States could carry on like this and hope to win the trust of all the nations in the world. All they're doing is hurting their image in all the nations of the world. It does nothing for their esteem abroad whatsoever. They're quickly becoming a failed state.
Let's quickly run through some details regarding U.S. debt and deficits, because as I mentioned earlier, Doge unable to make any meaningful impact, Elon Musk leaving, and now we've got this big, beautiful bill, which Elon has publicly come out and said, I'm sorry, I can't take this anymore. This bill is a complete abomination, something along the lines of shame on those people who even approved of it. We've got Trump proposing to raise the military budget for 2026 by 13% to over $1 trillion. The Treasury needs to refinance $9 trillion and issue $2.5 trillion in new debt this year. We were sold a reduction in government, and what we got was the opposite. How long can this can keep getting kicked down the road, and what are the implications should this whole thing collapse, if you think that's a possibility?
Oh, my goodness sakes alive. I don't want any half decent thinking person would run screaming from this. Elon is absolutely right in what he said. I look at what's going on in the U.S. The U.S. government is spending money it doesn't have, okay? And that has to be financed through more debt that can never be repaid, okay? At least not in dollars with purchasing power that they enjoy today. And you're absolutely right. They've got, 9 trillion or 7 trillion to refinance plus whatever, and the U.S., but the U.S. isn't the only country with this dilemma, with only a handful of exceptions in the world, with the main one being Russia of all places. All of the world's nations are in the same boat as the U.S. with debts they cannot be repaid. Okay, they're never going to repay them, but if they do, they're going to be like in Deutschmark, in the Deutschmarks of the 20s. Or in the Zimbabwe dollar. I mean, I've got $100 trillion. I got two of them. Okay, $200 trillion notes. And they wouldn't buy you a cup of coffee in downtown Zimbabwe today. They wouldn't. As for how long the West, the U.S. in particular, and the West in general can continue to kick this can, boy, that's a good question, and everybody gets asked it, and nobody's got an answer. But the rapidly rising gold price should be the clarion call that all is not well in the fiat currency world. And to quote Hemingway one last time, the end will come like it does for bankruptcy. As I stated before, slowly at first, then suddenly. How fast the suddenly part manifests itself is not known, but the slowly part is getting faster and faster this year with each passing month and now week. And as I stated at the end of every Saturday column, and in my newsletter, I'm all in the precious metals. and it will remain so to whatever end.
Is hyperinflation a risk in your view of the US dollar potentially at some point, and perhaps by proxy, could we see a global hyperinflation for the first time in history?
I suppose that's that's entirely possible. Hyperinflation is when people the general population starts to realize that this inflation thing is not going to go away, and it has become policy of the government to debase the currency. We're starting to see signs of that now. I think that if they allowed commodity prices to trade freely, it would become obvious even quicker. That's one of the reasons why they're sitting on the precious metals prices now, because they don't want this hyperinflation become that obvious, which it already is, by the way. I mean, what U.S. is $36 trillion in debt, and they have to refinance it. I mean, it's already here. Okay, so there's the hyperinflation part of it is entirely possible. Okay, we're starting to see the thin edge of the wedge in the gold price. Okay, and a few other things, and it's entirely possible that will happen. And I just have no idea how not only the U.S. government, but the world central banks will react when that happens. But it's possible. It's not here yet, but like I said, it's the thin edge of the wedge. The camel has already got his nose under the tent. Use another analogy.
Tell us about Ed Steer's Gold and Silver Digest, where people can find it and what it is you do there.
Okay, I have a website. It's Ed's. Just Google my name, Ed Steer, S-T-E-E-R, Ed Steer Gold and Silver. My website will pop up, and there's a tab on there that gives you a free sample column, and you read that, and it gives you an idea of the kind of information that I provide. 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. So about 260 columns a year, and the freight is US $100.
Great. Well, I'll put a link in the description below to Ed Steer's Gold and Silver Digest for those who want to check it out. Thank you once again, Ed. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I can't wait to do it again.
Entirely my pleasure, Jesse.
Thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, this episode is brought to you by ARC, silver, gold, osmium for all your precious metals needs. And to take advantage of their specials right now, Silver Kangaroos 2023 1-ounce coins, $2.47 over spot. Silver Maple Leafs 2025 1-ounce coins, only $2.87 over spot. While supplies last. Reach out to owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.